Picture the most bored you have ever been in your life. Maybe it was a long flight with no Wi-Fi. Maybe it was a waiting room with nothing on the walls. Maybe it was a Sunday afternoon that felt like it was deliberately trying to outlast you. Now multiply that feeling by eternity. No phone, no book, no music, no language complex enough to hold a real conversation, no art, no story. Nothing invented yet. Just you, a fire that's starting to die, the sound of wind through trees, and a darkness so complete you can't see your hand in front of your face. That was the reality for our earliest ancestors. Not thousands of years ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago. And here's the thing that should stop you in your tracks. Those people, staring at dying fires with absolutely nothing to do, are the reason everything you love exists. Because what happened in those empty hours didn't stay empty for long. We have a story we tell ourselves about early humans. It goes something like this. Life was brutal, short, and consumed entirely by survival. Every waking moment was spent running from predators, chasing animals, gathering roots, building fires. There was no free time because survival left no room for it. It's a clean story. It's also almost entirely wrong. In the 1960s, an anthropologist named Marshall Solins did something remarkable. Instead of studying ancient humans through fossils and ruins, he went to find the closest thing still living on Earth to our original way of life. He spent years living among the Jew-Hoansi people of the Kalahari, a hunter-gatherer group whose lifestyle had remained largely unchanged for tens of thousands of years. What he documented shattered the myth completely. These people worked, on average, between 15 and 20 hours per week. Not per day, per week. The rest of the time, the long, open afternoons, the slow evenings, the quiet mornings, they were simply available. Sitting, resting, existing without agenda. Solins called them the original affluent society, but not because they had wealth in any modern sense. He meant it in the truest sense of the word. They had abundance of time. More unscheduled, undemanded, unclaimed time than almost any person alive today ever experiences in a single week. So let's set the record straight from the beginning. Ancient humans were not too busy to be bored. They were bored constantly. The question that actually matters is what their minds did when no one was asking anything of them. The answer is one of the most important stories in human history. Imagine a coastline in southern Africa. The year is roughly 75,000 BCE. The ocean is loud. The air smells of salt and something burning somewhere inland. A person, we'll never know their name, their gender, anything about them, is sitting near the mouth of a cave. There is nothing that needs doing right now. The food is handled, the shelter is fine, the fire is going. And so they pick up a small shell from the ground. They look at it. They look at it for a long time. And then, for no practical reason whatsoever, they start to drill a hole through it. This wasn't a tool. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't food preparation. There was no survival advantage to what this person was doing. They were simply doing something with their hands because their mind needed somewhere to go. Decades ago, archaeologists excavating a site called Blombos Cave in South Africa unearthed those shells, over 40 of them, each with a deliberately drilled hole, each coated with red ochre pigment, each worn in a way that suggests they were threaded and carried as decoration. 75,000 years old. The oldest known art objects in human history weren't painted on cave walls by spiritual visionaries. They were made by someone who had a free afternoon and didn't know what else to do with it. Think about what that drilling actually took. A stone awl, enormous patience, hours of effort to perforate something smaller than a coin. No reward except the object itself. No applause, no audience. Just the process, the result, and whatever that first person felt when they looked at what they'd made. That feeling, that specific strange satisfaction of creating something from nothing, is the same thing an artist feels in a studio today. The same thing a musician feels after writing a song. The same thing you feel when you make something you're proud of, even when no one asked you to. It didn't start in a gallery. It started in an empty afternoon that needed filling. Now go forward in time, not all the way forward. Just 40,000 years ago. A cave in what is now southern Germany. Another unnamed person, another idle moment. But this time, instead of a shell, they have the hollow bone of a vulture, large, lightweight, rigid, and they start carving finger holes into it. Archaeologists found that flute. It's called the Hohlfels vulture bone flute, and it is one of the oldest musical instruments ever discovered. 5 finger holes, 2 deep notches at the mouthpiece, playable even now. Someone created functional music 40 millennia before the first city was built. Here's what's striking about that. The flute required not just time, but theory. You don't accidentally carve a playable instrument. You have to understand that spacing matters, that breath pressure creates pitch, that a longer tube changes the sound. Someone had to think about all of this, in quiet, in stillness, in the kind of unhurried mental space that only opens up when there's nothing urgent to deal with. Neuroscientists who study music cognition have argued for years that musical ability may actually predate complex language in our species. The neural architecture for processing rhythm and melody is older, more primitive, more deeply embedded than the systems we use for grammar and syntax. We were wired to feel music before we were wired to build sentences. Why? Because rhythm is pattern recognition. And pattern recognition, for most of human prehistory, was the difference between life and death. The snap of a twig that breaks a beat, the silence before a predator strikes, the rhythm of seasons, of weather, of animal migration. A brain that could detect and remember rhythmic patterns had an edge. Music was the brain's pattern engine turned outward, transformed from a survival tool into something beautiful in the space of a quiet afternoon. Here's something that sounds simple until you actually sit with it. You cannot be bored without a concept of the future. Think about that. To experience boredom, real, genuine boredom, you have to know that this moment is too long, that something else could be happening, that a different version of right now is possible. Boredom requires the ability to imagine a reality that does not currently exist. Most animals can't do this. A dog waiting by the door isn't experiencing boredom the way you do. It isn't thinking, I could be at the park right now, but instead I'm here. It's simply in the state it's in, waiting for a change in its environment. Boredom is a uniquely complex cognitive experience, and our ancestors felt it, which means that at some point in our evolutionary history, some specific threshold we crossed, probably gradually over thousands of generations, human brains developed the ability to conceive of a world that wasn't immediately in front of them, a tomorrow, a possibility, an absence that could be filled. And the moment you can imagine things that aren't real, you've unlocked something extraordinary, the ability to ask questions. A person staring into a fire 100,000 years ago, with nothing to do and nowhere to be, isn't just passing time. Their mind is running simulations. What if the hunt fails tomorrow? What was that sound last night? Where does the sun go when darkness comes? What happens to a person after they stop breathing? Every religion humanity has ever created starts with questions like that. Every philosophy, every science. Not from practical necessity, you don't need to know where the sun goes to eat breakfast, but from the restless motion of a mind that can't stop generating questions once it's been freed from immediate demands. Research published in the early 2010s by psychologist Sandy Mann showed something that should genuinely surprise you. When people were deliberately subjected to the most boring conditions researchers could design, copying numbers from a phone directory, sitting quietly for extended periods, and then given creative tests immediately afterward, their creative output was dramatically higher than participants who had been fully stimulated before testing. Boredom doesn't deaden the brain, it ignites it. The mechanism is called the default mode network. It's the set of brain regions that activate specifically when you are not focused on an external task, when you're daydreaming, mind-wandering, sitting with nothing to do. Neuroscientists initially thought this network was inactive, a kind of idle mode. Then they scanned it properly. It's one of the most energetically expensive networks in the brain. It burns enormous resources, and it's responsible for creativity, self-reflection, empathy, long-range planning, and your ability to understand other people's inner lives. It only turns on fully when you're doing nothing. The most powerful cognitive system in your brain has one activation condition: leave it alone. Now here's the piece of the story that most people miss. Boredom didn't just give us art, music, and imagination, it gave us each other. Robin Dunbar, the British anthropologist famous for identifying the natural limit of human social groups at around 150 people, spent years studying something deceptively simple: what do humans talk about when they have nothing important to talk about? His findings were striking. Across cultures, across contexts, across history, roughly 2/3 of human conversation is what he calls social information exchange. Stories about other people. Who did what happened between two people in the group, what someone said, how someone responded, what it means for everyone else. We call this gossip, usually with a dismissive undertone. Dunbar calls it the foundation of civilization. Before language reached its current complexity, our primate ancestors bonded through physical contact, grooming each other, the way chimpanzees still do. Grooming builds trust. It releases hormones that create social attachment. But it has a hard limit. You can only groom one individual at a time. In a group of any size, physical grooming cannot do the work required to maintain social cohesion. Language changed that equation completely. With language, you could maintain social bonds with multiple people simultaneously. You could build trust with someone across a fire without ever touching them. You could establish alliances, repair ruptures, signal loyalty, and process shared events, all through words alone, and all while warming your hands and doing nothing particularly productive. This is the origin of human storytelling, not epic tales of gods and heroes that came much later. It started around fires, among people with nothing pressing to do, talking about what had happened, what might happen, and what it all meant for the group. And those conversations, that constant low-stakes socially driven storytelling, gradually became something more. The stories got longer, more elaborate. People started to narrate events they hadn't witnessed personally. Then events that had never happened at all. Hypothetical hunts. Imagined dangers. What would we do if? What did the stars mean last night? What should we tell the children about the darkness? Fiction, the ability to narrate invented events and have other people enter the story with you, may be the most uniquely human ability we possess. And it began in the same place as the bead and the flute, in the undemanding, unhurried space of an afternoon that needed filling. Here's the uncomfortable part of this story, and I want you to sit with it. We are the first generation of humans in 300,000 years who have systematically eliminated boredom, not reduced it, not managed it, eliminated it. Every pocket of stillness, every waiting moment, every quiet pause that once gave the default mode network time to do its work has been plugged with stimulus. A notification, a scroll, a video, a podcast filling the commute, a show running while the other show downloads. We did this gradually, and we told ourselves it was productivity. We called it optimization. We called it staying informed. We called it entertainment. What we haven't talked about is the cost. Psychologists have documented a steady rise in what they call cognitive restlessness, an inability to tolerate the absence of input, an anxiety that rises when nothing is actively demanding our attention. Children who have never experienced sustained boredom in unstructured play show deficits in exactly the cognitive capacities the default mode network builds: creativity, empathy, internal narrative, long-range planning. We are slowly turning off the most powerful cognitive system evolution spent hundreds of thousands of years building, and we're doing it voluntarily, in exchange for a slightly more entertaining wait at the bus stop. Before we finish, I want to say something directly. If you've made it this far into this video, you're not here by accident. You're the kind of person who wants to understand how things actually work, not the surface version, the real version underneath. The version that explains why humans are the way we are. That's exactly what this channel exists for. Every week we go to the root of things, the science, the history, the psychology, but explained in a way that actually lands, that actually changes how you see the world, if that's the kind of thinking you want more of. Subscribing costs you nothing, and you'll never miss another one of these. Hit the button. Join the people who want to understand more deeply. Now back to what might be the most important idea in this entire video. That person in the cave. The one with the shell, the one with the bone, the one staring into fire asking questions that had no answers yet. They didn't change the world despite having nothing to do. They changed the world because of it. The bead became art, the bone became music, the questions became religion, philosophy, and science. The stories told around the fire became the entire architecture of human civilization. Language, culture, identity, trust, society. None of it required tools beyond what the mind produces when it's left alone. And you have that same mind, the exact same hardware, the same default mode network waiting to run, the same capacity for imagination and creativity and insight, the same instinct to ask questions the moment the noise goes quiet. The phone doesn't make you smarter. The constant stream of content doesn't make you more creative. The research is clear on this. The bead wasn't made by a stimulated brain. It was made by a quiet one. So the next time you're waiting somewhere and your hand moves automatically toward your pocket, pause just for a moment. Let the silence do what silence was designed to do. You might not make a flute. You might not invent a religion. But something in that stillness has been building civilizations for a very long time. Trust it.